Welcome to Hooked on Enduro. I'm Jason, and today we're in the Triple L Supply studio here in Cody, Wyoming, the irrigation and pipe supply that is also a major sponsor of our race team. All right, let's jump to our Cajun Classic National Enduro recap. Before I even got to the race, I drove up to Billings, Montana and slept in my truck so that way I could catch an early flight out of Billings. Got to the race site on Friday, spent all of my Saturday making some changes to the bike, mostly fixed the brake line and changed the hand shield so that way there was no interference with the brake line again. Did everything that I didn't have time to do after the last race. Since there's no factory mechanic under this tent, I have to get all this done when we show up to the race. This national started out right into a transfer section, but all the transfer sections in this race were all single track, which is kind of a nice change. Before the start of this race, I will admit I was a little bit apprehensive and nervous. We were struggling a lot with being able to get out and ride still. We were still getting some late snows and they weren't drying out very well. So we got maybe 2 rides in before this national. We've been still battling snow. We'll get a snow and it'll melt, and then right about the time the trails are dry enough to actually ride, then we'll get another snow. So we're only getting maybe 1 day of riding in every few weeks. And I know some of you East Coast guys are thinking, oh, well, it's mud, just ride it. Well, out here we have a lot of bentonite in this area, and it's not exactly rideable mud. The ride we went out on where the rain had just started and it led into a snow. You can see here I totally just slide out, and I'm having to push my bike on flat ground because I can't get the front wheel to turn in the mud. And here as I step away to look at what's going on, you can see how much mud is packing into the front fender. Now this mud is like modeling clay. It's really nasty stuff. In test 1, started out fun, had a good flow going, and then the arm pump started. And once the arm pump started, it went all downhill from there. Once I got the arm pump shaken out, I never really turned it back on. Mentally, I kind of was still stuck in that state. The ride was fantastic. It was fun single track. It was really kind of chewed up. I was really struggling. Even though the temperatures weren't that high, it was only about 84 degrees, but with 93% humidity, I felt like a fish out of water. I totally was not accustomed to that. I was sweating so hard. After we finally wrapped up test 3, I was glad I put a spare pair of goggles in my utility can caddy because it was nice to be able just to switch them out, just to have something that wasn't soaked in sweat. The conditions really were quite good. There was a few spots where we had a little bit of mud. I talked to my dad on an earlier road. He didn't remember seeing any mud. Being back all the way in the 60s, there was one little crossing that was pretty rutted out and pretty gooey. As I passed this bike that's stuck on the right, the rut kind of cut at a little bit of an angle, and I was just a little bit off balance. It was just enough to tip the bike over. And after I get up here, I go to grab the grips, and they were just slimy and slick as snot, and my gloves were slick and slimy. So here I'm trying to get it all wiped off real quick because I don't want to slide off the grips, and away we go again. Even though I had the same hydration setup I did for racing Glen Helen in 94-degree heat, I still could not keep up with the sweat. And as I was starting to go into test 5, I could feel the cramps starting to tease in the transfer section. So I hit my pickle juice and jumped into test 5. And I did not get very far into it until my legs were cramping up. And then after that, it was just a matter of trying to manage the hamstring cramps that were going from one leg to the other. A lot of these sections where I'm in these straights sitting down with one leg out like I was, doing a big rutted motocross turn on a flat turn, just trying to stretch out that cramp before it went full lock. Once again, I got my keister handed to me back east, but this time I was at least not as far down the stack as before, so we're making improvements, but it's a whole lot of fun. And it's so cool to get to ride these areas that are not my normal places. I really like to be riding a little bit more where I think I should be, but we're gonna make some headway, and I'm filming this monologue now only a week or so before the next national, and thankfully the weather's been a little bit more compliant and we've been able to get out and ride more, so optimistic it'll be a better ride, coming into it a little bit better headspace, a little bit better conditioned, and Louisiana was a blast. See you guys on the next one.